Summer night, 1938. 200 yards from residential homes, something roars. The sound cuts through darkness like a blade. Windows rattle, children wake screaming. The smell arrives next, rot and ammonia and something ancient. Something that doesn't belong in American suburbs. Behind rusting chain link, shapes move. Bears pacing, lions prowling. The fences sway when they push against them. Metal groans. Wood posts lean. In the houses nearby, people lie awake wondering when, not if. This is Pittman's Zoo, and it shouldn't exist. Indiana, 1930. The Great Depression crushes everything. Banks collapse, farms die. Men scramble for any income. Some dig ditches. Others sell apples on corners. The Pittman family owns 20 acres of scrubland, highway on one side, residential streets on the other. They've raised chickens and pigs for years. Now they decide to raise something more profitable: lions, bears, tigers, wolves. The business model is brutally simple. Buy exotic animals cheap from failing circuses. Build crude enclosures using salvaged materials. Charge admission. Families driving cross-country will stop. Pay 50 cents. See wild beasts. Move on. No regulations exist. The federal government doesn't regulate private animal collections. State laws cover livestock, not predators. Counties have no zoning for menageries. If you own land, you can keep anything. Spring, 1930. The first animals arrive. 2 black bears from a circus liquidation. 1 mountain lion from a dealer nobody asked questions about. 3 wolves. The collection grows as opportunities present themselves. Henry Pittman is 47, former farmer, war veteran, practical man who understands large animals, but understanding cows isn't understanding apex predators. Construction begins immediately. The family uses what they can find: wood posts from abandoned properties, chicken wire, chain link fence salvaged from demolished buildings. The budget is whatever survives after food costs. The Depression makes everything scarce except desperation. The enclosures measure 15 by 20 feet. Some have concrete floors, others just dirt. Chain link walls rise 8 feet, corrugated metal roofs. The structures look like oversized dog kennels because that's essentially what they are. No secondary containment. Each cage has one door. It opens directly to the walkway. No airlock, no buffer zone. When a keeper opens that door, nothing stands between human and animal except attention. And luck. The property layout creates immediate danger. The zoo occupies the front of the Pittman land. Behind it, within 200 yards, residential homes stand. Families with children. Bedroom windows facing the enclosures. They can hear everything, smell everything. The proximity isn't just unpleasant, it's lethal waiting to happen. Small advertisements appear in local newspapers. Wild animals of the world and thrilling close-up views. Price, 50 cents, cheaper than movies. The Depression makes even modest entertainment a luxury. Families come, parents bring children. They walk wooden pathways past cages, see bears pacing in circles, hear lions roaring. The proximity thrills some, terrifies others. Everyone pays at the gate. The operational model relies on extreme cost reduction. Feed expenses consume most revenue. The Pittmans use whatever costs nothing. Livestock waste from slaughterhouses, roadkill when available, spoiled meat from grocery stores, the kind of feed that would make a dog sick. The bears get it. The lions get it. The wolves get it. Animals develop nutritional deficiencies within months. Digestive problems, infections, but veterinary care costs money the family doesn't have. Sick animals either recover or they don't. Replacement is cheaper than treatment. Water comes from a well. The bears have a small pool, more puddle than pond. It never drains. Water turns green. Algae blooms. Disease vectors multiply. But draining and refilling takes time and labor. Neither is available. The smell becomes the defining characteristic. Carnivore waste produces intense odor. Multiply that by multiple large predators. Add stagnant water. Include rotting feed. The stench carries hundreds of yards on summer wind. A neighbor will later write in her diary, "The smell reaches inside our home even with windows closed. We can't escape it. Nobody can." Complaints begin within the first year. Letters to city council document everything: noise, smell, fear. One mother writes, "My children can't sleep. The roaring continues past midnight. How long must we endure this?" Another, "Property values are falling. Who wants to live next to wild animals?" The Pittmans respond defensively. They own the land. Operate a legal business. Pay taxes. The complaints, they argue, come from city people who don't understand rural life. They see criticism as snobbery, not legitimate concern. Henry Pittman is not educated in zoology. He views animals as agricultural commodities, livestock that happens to be more dangerous. The concept of animal welfare as distinct from basic survival doesn't exist in his framework. He's an entrepreneur in an era that celebrates self-reliance. The Depression creates a culture where any successful business deserves respect. Making money during economic collapse seems virtuous regardless of method. Critics can be dismissed as jealous or soft. His sons help. Two teenage boys handle feeding and cleaning. The work is dangerous from the beginning. No safety protocols exist, no training programs. Knowledge comes from experience. Mistakes happen. 1933, spring morning. The first serious injury occurs. One son enters the bear enclosure to replace water containers, standard task. The bear, a male weighing over 400 pounds, is supposed to be in the separate compartment. He isn't. The attack is sudden. The boy escapes with deep lacerations across his forearm and shoulder. Muscle damage, blood loss. The family treats the injury at home. No hospital, no police report. The incident remains private. The son recovers, returns to work within weeks. The family installs a sliding panel in that particular cage to separate the bear during maintenance, but only that cage. No other enclosures receive modifications. The pattern is established: react to disaster, minimize cost. Hope nothing worse happens. The business survives through the Depression years. Attendance fluctuates with the economy. Summer brings visitors, winter brings poverty. The animals need constant care regardless of revenue. The financial pressure never stops. By 1938, the collection has expanded dramatically. 5 bears, 3 lions, 2 tigers, wolves, a leopard, monkeys, reptiles, exotic birds. The inventory grows because larger collections attract more visitors. Each edition increases revenue potential and risk. Enclosure maintenance lags far behind expansion. Older cages show serious wear. Wood rots, wire rusts. Posts weaken at the base. Repairs happen only when something breaks completely. When a fence section collapses, someone patches it with whatever is available. Preventive maintenance doesn't occur. Money isn't available. Time isn't available. The lions present the greatest concern. Adult male lions weigh over 500 pounds, generate tremendous force when they move. The chain-link fence containing them is residential grade, meant for dogs, not predators. Engineering analysis would reveal inadequacy immediately. No analysis happens. Feeding time becomes a spectacle. The Pittmans advertise specific feeding hours. Visitors crowd around cages to watch. Bears stand on hind legs. Lions roar. The drama attracts paying customers. It also creates deadly conditions. Keepers push meat through fence openings using long poles. Animals grab, sometimes pull. The pole becomes a tug-of-war rope. If the animal wins, the keeper's hand comes dangerously close to jaws. If the keeper wins, the animal learns frustration. The psychological impact on animals in such conditions is severe. Constant human presence, inadequate space, no enrichment. No mental stimulation. The bears pace repetitive patterns, back and forth, back and forth. Hours daily. Stereotypic behavior indicating severe stress. The cats show similar signs. The Pittmans interpret this as normal animal behavior. They don't understand they're watching psychological breakdown. Neighbors continue complaining. By 1940, complaint volume increases significantly, but war in Europe dominates headlines. Local zoning disputes seem trivial. The complaints accumulate in municipal records. Evidence building. One resident keeps a detailed diary, records every instance of noise after dark, documents smells by date and wind direction, photographs deteriorating fences. The diary exists as evidence if legal action becomes necessary. The resident is building a case methodically, waiting for the moment it becomes useful. War changes everything temporarily. Gas rationing reduces road travel, attendance drops. The Pittmans struggle more than ever. Feed becomes scarcer. The animals suffer visibly. Some die of malnutrition. Bodies are buried on the property in unmarked locations. But war also creates opportunity. Soldiers stationed nearby want entertainment. Military buses bring groups. The zoo experiences brief prosperity. The Pittmans use revenue to buy more animals rather than improve enclosures. The pattern repeats. Growth without safety, expansion without maintenance. 1943. September morning. The incident that should end everything. Thomas Drake is 41, local resident, unemployed factory worker desperate for any job. The Pittmans hire him for feeding and cleaning duties. He starts work in August. Dies in September. The day is ordinary until it isn't. Drake has been working at the zoo for 3 weeks. He understands the routine. Feed the animals, clean the enclosures, follow the protocols such as they are. Morning. Cool air. The smell of animals and decay. Drake approaches the bear enclosure carrying a bucket and tools. The bear is supposed to be behind the sliding panel. Separated, secured. Drake checks the panel position. It appears closed. The The locking mechanism is corroded. Nobody knows this. The rust is internal, invisible. The panel looks secure but isn't. Drake opens the main gate, steps inside. The enclosure is 15 by 20 feet. Concrete floor, metal walls. The air is thick with animal smell. He moves to the center, sets down the bucket, kneels to begin cleaning. Behind the panel, the bear pushes, testing. The corroded lock releases. Metal scrapes against metal. The panel slides open 6 inches. Drake hears it, turns, sees the bear's head emerging through the gap. 400 pounds of muscle and instinct. He runs for the gate, 4 feet away, might as well be 4 miles. The bear moves faster than anything that large should move. Covers the distance in perhaps 2 seconds. Catches Drake from behind, claws rake across his back, teeth find his shoulder. He falls. The attack lasts 30 seconds, maybe less. Time becomes meaningless in violence. Henry Pittman hears screaming. Runs from the office, sees what's happening through the fence, grabs a shotgun kept nearby for exactly this scenario. He fires into the air. The sound drives the bear back. The animal retreats through the panel opening, confused, agitated. Drake lies on concrete, not moving. Blood pools beneath him, spreading. The ambulance arrives within 20 minutes. Drake is conscious, in shock, massive trauma across his back and legs, puncture wounds from teeth, broken ribs. He's aware enough to know he's dying. They load him into the ambulance, speed toward the hospital. He dies en route, cause of death, exsanguination, and traumatic shock. The scene remains, blood on concrete, the bear pacing in the rear compartment. The corroded lock lying on the ground where it fell. Police arrive, photograph everything, the enclosure, the panel, the lock, the blood spatter pattern. They interview Henry Pittman, interview the other workers, document the mechanical failure. The investigation concludes, mechanical failure combined with operator error. Drake should have verified the lock before entering. The equipment was defective. Responsibility is distributed. Blame diluted. Nobody is wholly at fault. Everyone is partially at fault. The county prosecutor reviews the case for potential criminal charges. Criminal negligence is possible, but the legal framework is weak. No specific laws govern private menageries. Animal cruelty statutes apply to intentional abuse, not inadequate equipment. Involuntary manslaughter requires proving the Pittmans knew the equipment was dangerous and acted with reckless disregard. The defense would argue ignorance and poverty. Hard to disprove. The case never goes to trial. Drake's widow needs money. The Pittmans need the matter closed. Insurance provides a settlement. The amount is not disclosed. Terms include confidentiality, no admission of guilt. No public accountability. The transaction is purely financial. Local newspapers report the incident, front-page news. The story emphasizes danger and tragedy. The Journal-Gazette headline, "Zoo Worker Killed by Bear in Enclosure." The article describes the attack, quotes the police chief, explains the mechanical failure, names Thomas Drake, gives his age and address. Public sentiment shifts violently. What had been tolerated as eccentricity now appears as reckless endangerment. Letters to the editor flood in. Readers demand immediate closure. One letter, "How many more must die before we act?" Another, "This tragedy was preventable. The blood is on city hands for allowing this to continue." A third, "Close the zoo now, today, before another family loses someone." The coalition demanding action grows rapidly. Neighbors who complained for years are joined by people newly aware of the danger. City officials face intense pressure, but legal authority is unclear. The zoo operates on private land outside city limits, county jurisdiction. The county commissioners meet, discuss options, want the problem gone but lack clear legal mechanism for forcing closure. The solution is compromise. The Pittmans agree to make improvements, hire contractors to reinforce fencing, install double-door systems on the most dangerous cages, make repairs that should have happened years earlier. The work costs several $1,000s, money the family doesn't have. Insurance provides some, they borrow the rest. The improvements satisfy authorities temporarily. The zoo remains open, but attendance collapses. Drake's death has branded the place as dangerous. Families choose other attractions. Revenue falls. The financial squeeze returns with greater intensity. Insurance becomes impossible. After Drake's death, insurers either refuse coverage or charge prohibitive premiums. Operating without insurance is legal, but financially suicidal. One lawsuit could destroy the family completely. The immediate post-war period brings suburban expansion. The town grows outward. New housing developments push into formerly rural areas. Land values rise. The neighborhood around Pittman Zoo transforms. Rural becomes suburban. Farms become subdivisions. New residents move in. Veterans returning from war. Young families seeking suburban dream. They buy homes assuming peaceful residential environment. They discover lions roaring at night, bears pacing 200 yards from bedroom windows. The complaints resume with fury. These are not rural farmers accustomed to agricultural noise. These are urban transplants with different expectations. The presence of predators feels surreal and threatening. Children can't play outdoors freely. Parents fear escape. The anxiety is constant, and escapes happen. A monkey gets loose in 1947, spends 2 days in neighborhood trees. Children watch it from yards, eventually recaptured. A wolf escapes in 1948. Police shoot it within hours. The animal never approaches humans, but the incident makes headlines, proves containment is imperfect. The question becomes obvious. What if a lion escapes? What then? The Pittmans grow increasingly defensive. They see themselves as victims of urban encroachment. They operated for nearly 2 decades. Now newcomers want to shut them down. From their perspective, the injustice is clear, but the legal environment is changing. Zoning laws strengthen. Courts recognize that land use affects neighbors. Private property rights still dominate, but limitations are gaining acceptance. 1949. Organized opposition forms, neighborhood association, petition with signatures, lawyer retained, lawsuit prepared. The grounds, nuisance law, noise, smell, and danger constitute unreasonable interference with property enjoyment. City Council receives the petitions, holds public hearings. The testimony is emotional and intense. A mother testifies, "My daughter has nightmares. She hears the lions and thinks they're coming for her." She's 6 years old. A homeowner, "I've lost 20% of my property value. No one wants to buy here. Would you?" Another resident, "It's not if something terrible happens, it's when." The Pittmans defend their livelihood, argue they've made improvements, claim they operate safely. The hearing lasts months. The legal case is stronger than any previous attempt. Precedents have accumulated. Other jurisdictions have closed similar operations through nuisance actions. The Pittman's lawyer advises they will likely lose in court. The financial calculation becomes brutal. Legal fees will be substantial. If they lose, they face fines and closure anyway. If they win, the hostility will make operation impossible. The business is failing regardless. The collection has market value. Animals can be sold, circuses still operate, roadside attractions still exist, negotiations with buyers begin. Closure happens gradually over late 1949 and early 1950. Animals are sold individually or in groups. The bears go to a circus, the lions to a facility in Missouri, the tigers to separate buyers. Smaller animals find various homes. Some animals are euthanized when no buyer appears. Bodies buried on property. The last resident leaves in April 1950. The enclosures remain for months. Empty structures, rusting wire, rotting wood. The smell lingers. The ground is contaminated with 2 decades of waste. The Pittmans sell the land in 1951. A developer purchases it for residential construction. The enclosures are demolished. Debris hauled to landfill. Ground graded and filled. Construction begins immediately. Within 2 years, new homes occupy the site. Young families move in. Children play in yards where bears once paced. The physical transformation is complete. The past is buried beneath suburban lawns. No marker indicates what existed there. No historical plaque. The developer sees no benefit in advertising the history. Buyers prefer not to know. The erasure is total. The Pittman family leaves the area. Moves to another state. Attempts to start fresh. Henry Pittman dies in 1958. His obituary mentions farming and military service. The zoo is not mentioned. Thomas Drake's grave is in the local cemetery. Simple headstone. Birth and death dates, no indication of how he died. His widow remarries, his children grow up without a father. The tragedy fades into family history, becomes a story rarely told. The bear that killed Drake was sold after the incident. Its fate is unknown. Records don't indicate which buyer took it or how long it lived. The animal was just inventory, moved through commercial channels, ended somewhere unmapped. The site today is indistinguishable from surrounding neighborhood. 3-bedroom homes, 2-car garages, manicured lawns, sidewalks where children ride bicycles. No physical trace of the zoo remains visible, but soil contamination may persist. 20 years of carnivore waste, buried animal remains. Chemicals used in crude sanitation attempts. The contamination lies beneath grass and concrete, invisible but present. Current residents generally don't know the history. Real estate agents don't disclose. The information exists in archives for those who search. Most people never search. The diary kept by the persistent neighbor survived, donated to local historical society, filed in a box with miscellaneous documents, unread for decades. Available to anyone who requests access. Nobody does. Drake's death appears in multiple sources. Census records show his family. Death certificate gives cause. Cemetery records mark his grave. Police files document the incident. The information exists for those willing to assemble it. The challenge is that no single archive contains the full story. Knowledge is distributed across repositories, requires cross-referencing, time, patience. Most history stays buried because reconstruction is labor-intensive. Pittman's zoo is not significant enough for academic study. No major figures involved, no national implications. Just a small operation that existed and closed. One man died. Animals suffered, the business failed, but the story contains larger patterns: how America regulated dangerous activities, how communities balanced property rights and public safety, how economic pressure shaped decisions about risk. Every mature regulatory system has similar origin stories: local disasters prompting local action, accumulated experience justifying broader rules, specific tragedies illustrating general principles. The workers at Pittman's zoo left no testimony. No interviews, no memoirs. Their experiences went unrecorded except Drake's fatal incident. We know he died, not what he thought or felt in those final seconds. The animals left even less trace. They were property, inventory. Their suffering was invisible. Their deaths were business losses. They existed in records as purchases and sales, nothing more. The experience of Pittman's zoo was not unique. Across America in the 1930s and 40s, hundreds of similar operations existed. Roadside menageries, tourist traps, family-run collections with minimal oversight, most closed for similar reasons: economic failure, legal pressure, accidents. The combination of inadequate infrastructure, financial stress, and increasing regulation gradually eliminated the business model. The regulatory framework that would have prevented Pittman's zoo didn't exist when it opened. The Animal Welfare Act wasn't passed until 1966. Before then, animal ownership was largely unregulated. State laws varied wildly. Some had basic requirements, others had none. Interstate commerce in wildlife occurred with minimal documentation. The federal government didn't track private collections. The system was entirely reactive. When accidents happened, communities responded. Laws passed locally. But each tragedy created new rules only in that jurisdiction. The patchwork left gaps. Operators could simply move to friendlier locations. Change came gradually through accumulated disasters. Each dead keeper, each escaped animal. Each community battle. The evidence mounted that private menageries created public safety risks markets couldn't resolve. Cultural shift mattered equally. Americans began viewing animals differently. Nature documentaries showed wild animals in their habitats. The cruelty of small cages became visible. Public tolerance declined. The Roadside Zoo era represented a transitional moment. Between agricultural treatment of animals as property and modern welfare concepts, between frontier individualism and regulatory oversight, between private rights and public safety, Pittman's zoo existed in that gap. The family operated within the legal framework of their time, but that framework was inadequate. The consequences were predictable. Drake's death was tragedy but not aberration. It was inevitable. The lessons are structural. Private operations driven by profit minimize costs. Animal welfare costs money. Without enforcement, welfare suffers. Market forces alone don't protect powerless beings or community interests. The modern regulatory system emerged from these lessons. Licensing requirements, inspection protocols, minimum standards for enclosures and care. The framework that seems obvious now was built through painful experience, through deaths like Drake's, but enforcement remains imperfect. Private collections still exist. Regulations vary by state. Some operations maintain animals in conditions experts consider inadequate. The battle between profit and welfare continues. The psychology of ownership hasn't changed fundamentally. People still acquire exotic animals for status or profit, still underestimate resources required, still prioritize their interests over animal needs. The impulse persists. What changed was the legal and social framework. Society decided certain standards were non-negotiable. That animal suffering for entertainment had limits. That community safety mattered more than individual property rights in certain contexts. These decisions were contested. Property rights advocates resisted regulation, argued government interference was tyranny. The debate was fierce, but the weight of evidence gradually shifted consensus. The shift occurred across decades. The children who visited Pittman Zoo in the 30s grew up, became adults with voting power. Their children saw nature on television. Expectations changed. What seemed normal became unacceptable. The transformation wasn't linear. Progress reversed at times. Budget cuts reduced inspections. Political winds shifted priorities. But the general trend moved toward greater protection and oversight. The price of this progress included businesses like Pittman Zoo. Operations that provided income to families during economic hardship, gave employment to men like Drake, offered affordable entertainment to Depression-era families. The calculus is complex. Real people lost livelihoods. Real communities lost attractions. The benefits of regulation came with costs. Acknowledging both is necessary for honest assessment. But the alternative was continuing preventable tragedies, sustaining conditions causing suffering, allowing dangerous situations to persist until the inevitable accident occurred. The question was whether society would act before or after the next death. Pittman's zoo forced no national reckoning. Too small. Drake's death was local news. But multiply the story by hundreds of similar operations. The accumulated evidence became undeniable. A researcher could reconstruct the full story. City council minutes, newspaper archives, property records, police reports, court documents. The paper trail exists in fragments across multiple repositories. Unread, waiting. The historical profession has limited resources. Pittman's zoo isn't significant enough for academic study, but the story matters because the pattern matters. Understanding how systems fail helps prevent repetition. Recognizing warning signs enables early intervention. History provides context for current choices. The families who live on the former zoo site deserve to know the history. Not to frighten them, but to remember. To understand that land holds stories, that communities make choices, that outcomes depend on decisions. The children playing in those yards are separated from Drake's death by 7 decades. That distance creates safety, but also obscures lessons. Infrastructure still ages. Budgets still tighten. Regulations still face resistance. Authorities still defer action. The specific circumstances change, but underlying dynamics persist. Pittman's zoo operated for 20 years. 2 decades of inadequate conditions. Warnings ignored. Complaints dismissed. 1 death prompted closure. How many warnings came before that fatal moment? Organizations facing similar questions today can learn from that pattern. What deterioration is occurring unnoticed? What complaints are being rationalized away? What disasters are accumulating probability? The answer requires honest assessment. Looking at infrastructure critically, listening to warnings seriously, acting on incomplete information rather than waiting for certainty purchased with tragedy. Pittman's zoo teaches that prevention is possible but requires will. The enclosures were obviously inadequate, the risks were evident, the tragedy was predictable, action could have occurred earlier. It didn't. Why? Because the costs of action seemed higher than costs of inaction, until suddenly they weren't. Drake's death changed the calculation instantly, but the calculation could have changed earlier. The transformation required someone to pay a price. Drake paid with his life, his widow with grief, his children with absence. The Pittmans with their business, the community with anxiety. Could those costs have been distributed differently? Could regulation have been implemented before death? These questions have no satisfying answers. Optimal outcomes require information and will that weren't available. Hindsight is precise, foresight is murky, but the knowledge was available. Neighbors knew conditions were dangerous, workers knew enclosures were inadequate. Officials received complaints for years. The information existed. It wasn't acted upon. That failure of action is the recurring theme. Not absence of information, but failure to act on it. Not ignorance, but inertia. The story is frustratingly familiar. Contemporary parallels are everywhere. Infrastructure reports warn of deficiencies, inspectors document violations, complaints accumulate, action is deferred, until catastrophe forces response. The cycle repeats because incentives remain constant. Immediate action requires resources. Deferred action might cost nothing if disaster doesn't occur. The gamble seems rational until it fails. Pittman's zoo lost the gamble. Drake's death was the moment costs materialized. Before that moment, the Pittmans operated for 19 years. The odds seem to favor continued operation, but odds don't apply to individual cases. Each day the risk exists. Eventually, given enough opportunities, failure occurs. The question is only when, not if. Understanding this principle should inform policy. Systems designed to accommodate risk until failure will eventually fail catastrophically. Redundancy and prevention cost money, but so does tragedy. The difference is that prevention costs can be planned and distributed. Tragedy costs arrive suddenly and destroy lives. The economic calculation should favor prevention. Often it doesn't. Why? Because prevention is invisible success. Nothing happens, no drama, no news. The costs are visible. The benefits are absence of disaster. Politically, that's difficult to defend. Tragedy is visible, creates urgency, forces action. But the action comes too late to prevent initial harm. The pattern is inefficient but persistent. Breaking the pattern requires changing incentives, making prevention politically attractive, creating accountability for deferred maintenance. Rewarding proactive management. Some jurisdictions have succeeded, others haven't. The variation suggests institutional design matters. Where oversight is strong and funded, outcomes improve. Where it's weak, problems persist. Pittman Zoo existed in weak oversight environment. That specific environment is gone, but weakness takes different forms. The challenge remains constant even as details change. The narrative ends where it began. Land that held a zoo now holds homes. The transformation is complete physically. The lessons remain accessible intellectually. Whether those lessons are applied is the question left unresolved. History provides information. People make choices. The connection between information and choice is imperfect. Pittman Zoo is gone. What it represented persists. The tension between profit and safety, between individual rights and community welfare, between knowing and acting. Drake died because a lock failed, but the lock failed because maintenance was deferred. Maintenance was deferred because money was tight. Money was tight because revenue was inadequate. Revenue was inadequate because the business model was flawed. The chain of causation runs through economics and decisions. Each link was breakable. Each breakpoint was an opportunity. None were taken until forced by tragedy. Systems fail through accumulated small decisions. Correction requires intervention before catastrophic outcome. The intervention is possible but requires will. Pittman Zoo is a case study in the absence of that will, and in the costs when will finally arrives too late. The story ended. But its shadow remains. In every deferred maintenance decision, every ignored warning, every calculation that assumes disaster happens to someone else. The pattern repeats because the incentives repeat, because human nature doesn't change. Because the same choices keep presenting themselves. History doesn't repeat, but it echoes, and the echo from that September morning in 1943 still sounds, if you listen carefully, if you're willing to hear it. The Animal Welfare Act passed in 1966, 23 years after Drake died. The legislation established federal oversight of animal facilities, required licensing and inspection, set minimum standards for enclosures, care, and handling, created enforcement mechanisms, gave the federal government authority it previously lacked. Between 1930 and 1950, over 600 roadside menageries operated across America. Most were similar to Pittman Zoo. Minimal enclosures, inadequate care, no oversight. By 1970, fewer than 100 remained. Regulation and changing attitudes eliminated most. Today, accredited zoos must meet strict standards, regular inspections, veterinary care, enrichment programs, adequate space. The transformation from Pittman's era to modern standards took 40 years, required federal legislation, resulted from accumulated tragedies. Drake was one tragedy among many. His death wasn't unique. It was typical. That's what makes it matter. The lessons aren't preserved in marble monuments. They're buried in archived newspapers, filed in dusty boxes, written in legal precedents, available to anyone willing to search. Few do. The land remembers nothing. The grass grows green. Children play safely. But the choice to act before tragedy rather than after remains. Every day, everywhere. That choice is the only memorial Drake needs. The only one that matters, if we make it.